Welcome once again to the complete free Flutter course presented by yours truly, Ovidus Manzurum. So last time we spoke about provider and we looked at the way we could build out this stopwatch screen and the top stopwatch screen's state using change notifier and the provider package. And first of all, I do want to apologize because last time I forgot to adjust my zoom level. So the code might have been a bit too small to read, but hopefully this time it's a bit better. Luckily, I am coding on a quite small screen on a laptop at home. So yeah, if I was coding on my work screen, which is really big, my regular zoom level would have been quite unreadable, but that was not the case. But leaving that aside, so today we're going to focus on another layer of abstraction. We went over provider first, and now we're going to go over another state management solution, which is Get or GetX. I'm not 100% sure how people pronounce this. And GetX is, in some ways, it's a bit similar to provider. It actually uses RxStart under the hood. It uses observables. Don't worry too much if you don't understand what that means, because you don't need to understand it to be able to use it. And in my opinion, it is much simpler to use than other packages. There's a lot less boilerplate. And that's what we're going to get into today. Now, of course, as always, when I do make the initial code, I'm going to leave a couple common bugs in it so that you can see how we can work through them and how to fix them and what they look like when you have those particular bugs. So when you encounter them in your own apps, you can fix them. But the first thing we're going to do is hit new file in state, and I'm going to call this timer state.dart. And as you guys can guess, the timer state is just going to be the same as stopwatch provider was, but for my timer class. I'm just going to run this. I haven't run it yet. For anyone that doesn't remember, our app is going to have a separate stopwatch screen and a timer screen. The stopwatch goes from bottom, from 0 upwards. The timer, we can set a time and go downwards from there. So what we're going to do here is, well, first I need to add GetX to my pubspec.yaml. So I'm going to go to pubspec.yaml, Control-Shift-P, pubspec assist, add updates dependency there. Then I'm going to type in get, and it's going to be the first one here, get. And there we go. So it gave me 3.5.1, which is the current version. And you can see it's the same here. If you're watching this in the future, then your version might be a bit different, but it shouldn't be a big issue. So this is currently our timer screen, but we want to modify it. So first I'm going to save my pubspec.yaml. And oftentimes after changing your dependencies, we do need to restart VS Code, but I'm going to try not to see if it recognizes everything I needed to recognize, but we'll see. So this will be get/get.dart. So yeah, it's not recognizing it, so I'm going to have to restart this and edit out the waits. Okay, now that I have restarted it, you can tell that you can see it's no longer giving me an error. Now this new package is being recognized. So now that I have this, similar to what I did with my stopwatch provider state, and I'm actually going to leave this open so we can kind of compare and contrast. I'm going to create a new class, but instead of extending change notifier, what I'm going to do is say class timer state, and I believe it's with, it might be extends, I'll have to double check, and that's going to be GetX controller. And of course this GetX controller is coming from package get.dart. Let me check. So it needs to be extends. I can never quite remember if I'm using extends or with like I am here, but that's fine. VS Code always helps me out. So after this, I'm going to create a stopwatch. I'm going to call it TSW just for timer stopwatch, and in fact I'll add that underscore, and I'm going to make this as a new stopwatch. So far nothing unusual. Now we're going to start doing something a tiny bit different. So the way the GetX controller works is by using observables under the hood, and observables come from a different package called RxStart. Rx is quite popular, there's different versions for different languages, but it can be a tiny bit complicated. So for anybody that was learning old school things like the old school block before the block package came out, you might recognize RxDart, you might have even worked with it, but there's a lot of boilerplate. So something like GetX simplifies all of that, so we don't need to understand all of it. But as a result, when I create a new variable here, which I want to be observed, the type I'm using is actually going to be an Rx string. And rather than remembering all of them, what I'm going to do is just use that var keyword. And I'll say var starting minutes equals, and I'm going to set this to 25. And then I'll put that .obs at the end. So this .obs tells GetX, or get, whatever you want to call it, that this is a property I want to pay attention to and that I want to watch change. And notice that when I put my mouse over it, it gives me the type here. It's an Rx string. Now there are several different Rx types. I could also do var starting seconds equals, and I'll modify this afterwards, but I just want to show you guys. So if I use 0 like this, it's going to give me an Rx int. And in fact, instead of creating the observable this way, I'm also allowed to do something like Rx string like this. And I can't remember if I can give it a type here. And normally I would do it the other way. So I can also do it this way. And I can also do Rx and give it a generic type of string. Similarly, I could give it type of int, but then of course this is going to give me an error and so on. But anyway, back here. So I'm going to give this to 0, and you know what, actually I'm going to leave it this way just so you guys can see the different versions when I upload the code. But normally I would just do this one. Keep in mind they are the same thing. So 2 lines below are the same, just different ways of doing the same thing. Okay, so I have this. What do we need after this? We're going to need a void start. And what am I going to do with my start function? Well, if not tsw dot is running, then we're going to, obviously, if I press this button, if somehow I get to it when my timer is already running, I don't want to do anything. But if it's not running, I want to do certain things, and we'll add more as we go along. But the first thing I'm going to do here is say, well, tsw.start, and then I'm going to need some kind of repeating function to actually get that string. But we'll do that in a bit. Void pause. And again, similar to this, we're not going to use these pause, unpause, and so on buttons yet. We're going to do that in a follow-up video, but I just want to separate the different things. So we'll say void pause if ts_tsw is running. Then we'll say tsw.stop, void unpause. And you're seeing the pattern. And there should be if it is not running, then we're gonna start it again, and then we'll run whatever like periodic function, which we don't have yet. Let me see what I had here. Reset. And in my reset function, I can just say, well, tsw.reset, and that'd be fine. And then I would have to stop my periodic function, but we didn't get that yet. Okay, so now that we have this, let's think about how we're going to get that correct string. So let's call it string update timer, string update display string. And I should also have, so as a result, over here I should have some kind of string, display string, and the default value, I'll just use it like this. And actually this gives me an opportunity to show you guys the final way of creating the observable, which is to use Rx string in this way. So again, all three of these are the same. It's just here I'm letting the compiler figure out the type for me. Here I'm using the generic type. Here I'm using this. And since I'm doing it this way, I could also type it in this way. In fact, I believe I could type it. No, I cannot type it in this way. But I believe I could type it like this and like this. So I could do this. But when working with a GetX, I think we can just use var. You guys know I'm not usually a big fan of using the var keyword, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially in these kind of situations. So let's leave it like this. Yes, the dynamic keyword, which I really hate. Var, I can understand why you would use it sometimes, but dynamic is just not good. Okay, so update display string. What is this going to do? So what I want to do is start with my starting minutes and starting seconds, which of course in the future will allow us to change, but not quite yet. And subtract however much time has elapsed from this amount of time. Now, because the main focus of the video is the state management, I'm not going to go through like all the different bugs. We're just going to make it correct from the beginning, I hope. Famous last words. So we'll say if, and that's tsw dot elapsed dot in seconds, and then we're going to have to do modulo 60 is greater than 1, and then I'm going to have to wrap all of this here. Then we will say, and I'll make an intermediate string str like that. Then str plus equals, so this should start with empty string. We're going to start with the brackets, the $, and we're going to say tsw dot elapsed dot in minutes, and this is going to be whatever the starting value is, so starting minutes, but of course it's going to give me an error because this is a string, so I'm going to have to do int starting min equals, and I'm going to have to do int dot pass. And what int dot pass is going to do is it's going to take a string as an input and then change that into an int. And I'm going to have to take this, but keep in mind that my starting minutes here is not a string, it's an rx string, it's an observable, so that's not exactly the same thing. To get the value held inside that observable, what I have to do is say dot value at the end, and that's going to be fine. And similarly, I should do the same thing in the starting seconds. So that's going to be int dot pass starting seconds dot value, and probably misspelled. No, that's fine. So this is the one thing we're going to have to, well, there's two things we'll need to remember when using GetX, but one of them is right here. Because these types, again, they're not the actual values, it's not actually a string. If I had an int, it's not actually an int, it's an observable. So as a result, to read the value, we need to use this dot value. If I just use this, I'm getting back an observable, which is similar to a stream, but it's not the string itself. But doing that, it's going to fix it right up. So that's going to be fine. So now I'm on starting minutes here. So I'll say starting min, that's going to be minus tsw.elapsed.in minutes minus 1. And you might be curious why I'm doing this. Well, essentially, if I start, like let's say only 1 second has gone by, I want it to say 24.59, right? And if I do tsw.elapsed.in minutes, this is going to show 0. Because, you know, a whole minute hasn't actually gone by. So that's why I need to remove this one, as long as my in seconds modulo 60 is greater than 1. If it's equal to 0, then I would want it to display 25.00 like that. So I don't need to remove that one. Okay, so we'll leave that. And otherwise, we're going to say str plus equals, and it's going to be a similar thing. Starting min minus tsw dot elapsed dot in minutes. And then for this one, I don't need the -1 at the end, so that's fine. And then I can also do this colon at the end. And I could put the seconds at the end here, but then I think the line would be a tiny bit too long. So then I'll just say str plus equals, and for the seconds, because we have this starting seconds here, what I want to do is say start sec minus tsw dot elapsed dot in seconds, and take all of this and make it modulo 60. So if I'm not mistaken, this should be the correct string. I won't be terribly surprised if I made a mistake somewhere, but we can debug that at the end. And then we can just return str. So that's my update display string. And then I'm just going to make a void periodic update display string, which is just going to have that, timer I had in the previous one. So to do that, of course, I'm going to have to make a timer t, and to use timer, I need to import dot async. Then going back here, we're going to say timer dot periodic. Duration will be duration seconds 1. So again, from last time, this means I'm going to repeat whatever function I have here every second, and then I'm going to say t here. T, of course, gives me access to this timer here. And then I'm going to do, where was this? Display string here. Display string equals, and this is going to give me an error. Update display string, like this. And even if I name this correctly, it's still going to give me an error, because, same as before, display string is an RX string and update display string is a regular string, so they're not the same thing. So instead, to update the value, same as last time, I'm going to have to do dot value over here, and that is going to make it work. Notice that unlike this time, I don't need to use notify listeners, I don't need anything like that, so that's all fine. And I am actually going to just print the display string value, so we can just do some kind of error checking. Also, I'm going to say starting periodic updates. Again, this is just for our error checking. And sorry about the children screaming outside. Somebody's lost his mum apparently. I'm also going to have starting timer over here. So now that we have this, we're also going to have to start my periodic. I'm just going to copy it because I don't trust my spelling. Like this. And that's almost it. But remember, the same way over here, I needed a bool get is running because I had to check this to see if I should display my my play button or if I should display my timer. I'm going to need a similar thing. So let's create a similar variable. Var, and we'll call it, I'll just call it is running. It's running. And in fact, I'll just use get is running, and it's going to be an arrow function similar to last time. And this is going to be tsw dot is running, just like that. And I'm just checking. Yeah, this all seems good. So this, and again, there is a small error here. That's why I have the print statements, but we're going to go through and fix them up afterwards. So this is essentially how we create the state class. It's similar to change notifier. The biggest difference is instead of saying with change notifier, I'm using extends GetX controller, and then afterwards my change notifier really needs these notify listeners. If you don't have notify listeners, then the widgets listening don't know that they have to update, so they're not going to get that change in value. Whereas on the other hand, I don't need to do this in GetX. By using .obs, I make it observable. Similarly, I can use rx string or rx with the type in the generic, and they're all going to work correctly. I don't need anything like notify listeners or anything like that. And yeah, aside from that, our pause, unpause, and all those, they still need a bit of work, but we're not going to do that in this video. So now we're going to go into our timer screen here. And currently the only thing I'm doing is returning a timer screen, or the text timer screen. So what I'm going to do instead is return OBX. And to use this, I need to import that. And OBX is going to take a function which has a builder. And we can just do something like this. And that's just because we don't have a return type yet. And what I'm going to do is say if, and now I'm going to get the data. And actually what I forgot to do here is my timer state is a class, so I need to create an instance of that class. So I'll say timer state, and of course I need to import that. State equals get.put, and then in here I need to create a new instance of that timer state, like this. And I should probably add a final afterwards as well. And now I can access these state variables exactly how you'd think. State.isRunning. And in fact, I'm going to use the opposite. If not state is running, then I want to have that play button. Let me see where I had that. And as you can imagine, because I'm about to copy paste this, that means I need to pull out this widget. So just going to copy this. And gonna right click on widgets, new file, play button .impm, and it's gonna be a stateless widget, play button. And over here we're gonna use all of this. So it needs to take an onTap. I'm gonna call it onPressed actually. Final function onPressed, because I find onPressed just to come more natural to me than on tap. So this will be onPressed. And I think that's the only thing I need to change, just make the constructor. And that's fine. So now instead of doing this, I can do play button here. And this is going to take an onPressed of state.start like this without the brackets at the end. And then the same way I can do that here, I can do it here. So if the state isn't running, then I'm going to return my play button, same as last time. And I'm going to give it an onPressed of, what was it? State.start, I think it's the same. Yeah, so notice that the function, I'm actually going to call it exactly the same thing. Even this property state.isRunning, it's the same. So when using GetX or when using the provider, it is really, really similar. That's why I wanted to show you guys provider first. Even though under the hood, they're actually using different things, because provider is using inherited widgets, whereas GetX is using RxStart and observables. The way we use them is really, really similar. But you will of course notice that to do this, I don't actually need to, my stopwatch provider. In my stopwatch screen, I had to have a change notify provider, and then I had to have a consumer. So I can abstract this part away and remove that. And instead of having that, what I need to do is use get.put, and then I need to have this widget OBX. And you might be wondering, why do I need this widget OBX, which has a function aside? Well, that's because, as you guys will of course remember, my stateless widget cannot change. Once I have that stateless widget, it just stays the same all the time. But the content of a function can change. So although the widget itself isn't changing, the function is changing, which is causing my widget to rebuild itself. Okay, but that aside, I actually left this here because I wanted the theme. So if it's not running, we're going to say else, and we're going to return, this, which is why I left it here, and with the sensor as well. So now I can delete this, delete all of this. I'll add comma here so I can format it. And instead of doing text timer screen, what I'm going to do is say state.displayString here. And this is giving me a error because, so same as before, we need to do .value like this. And that's almost it. Of course, as I mentioned, we will have a couple errors, and I need to run this again because when I restarted VS Code, it got rid of it. So I'm going to edit out the wait. Okay, so I've restarted the app. Now I should have the timer. Now let's see what happens when I actually go to my timer screen. It crashes. And look at this. So I'm not going to read, I'm actually not going to read all of this for you because it's quite a long error. But the reason I'm doing this is, notice how here I had to do state.displayString.value. Well, how about here? I'm not listening to the value, and that is what's causing it to crash. So again, I mentioned I would do things like this on purpose because I guarantee you when making your own apps, you're quite likely to forget this. And I figure if I show you the mistake and how to fix it and what the error looks like, you guys can recognize it and fix it quite easily. It's better than letting you figure it out by yourself, which is going to be much more difficult. But we're still not finished, actually. I'm going to try to restart it, and it crashes again. This time because there is no default value. So we're going to go to my... Now it tells me that the class bool has no instance getter value, right? So what's happening here? Well, this time, so it's crashing because now I'm saying state.isRunning.value, but there's no such thing. I'm not allowed to use .value on a bool because, and I have too many things open, because remember, these had to be observables. I needed the RX string or that kind of stuff, but I didn't do it here. I didn't make this an observable. So as a result, I can't observe it. I can't listen to it. But if I add .ops here and refresh, now goes the timer. It seems to be working correctly. Let's cross our fingers, press play. And we can see the timers going here, but I haven't actually, the state hasn't changed. I'm still seeing the play button instead of seeing this timer going down. So the reason it's doing this time is because we can't use a getter in the same way as we did in the previous provider. So what I'm going to have to do instead is say var is running equals, and I'm going to have that default starting value false.obs. And this is, of course, going to make it a RX bool. We can see here. And then I'm going to have to change it over, like whenever I actually change it. For example, in my start function. So here I'll say is running equals, well, .value equals true. And then of course in my pause, unpause and reset, I'm going to have to change it. But we didn't get that yet. And while I'm seeing this, I can also see we had a couple bugs in the way I wrote this. For example, in my seconds, gonna put all of this, wrap it in enough brackets. And I didn't show you guys how to do this last time, but well, I will this time. I can do .string, .toString, and I believe it's pad left. Yes, left 2. So again, I didn't want to show you guys last time because there's just so many different concepts I was showing you. But what pad left is going to do is put something to the side. So currently you're seeing, if I scroll up, when I get to like 8, 7, it doesn't have that 0 on the side. Well, pad left and also pad right will insert some character to make it be equal in length to whatever value we set, in this case 2. And I can also set the character I want at the beginning. And it's the other way around here. So there we go, that should fix it. And also this should be greater or equal to. So I believe that's it. There we go. So now it's working correctly. I held my breath for a second because when coding, it's quite common to not get all of the bugs, but those were all the intentional bugs. So I was thinking if anything else goes wrong, it wasn't planned. But yeah, so that's going to be it for GetX. We'll do a quick review. Now, of course, you'll notice pause, unpause, reset, those kind of functions are not finished. And we also have a memory leak actually because of our timer T here, but we'll fix all of those next time. For now, we're not going to worry about it. And also in the future, we're going to decide, we'll actually check to see if it's equal to 0 and do something then. Because for now, conceivably, so it's not going to happen now because I'm not going to wait 24 minutes. But right now, when we go below 0, it's just going to keep going. So we're going to get -1 minute, -2 minutes, and so on, which is not the behavior we want. But yeah, so quick review on GetX. GetX is used in a similar way to Provider, but it is a bit different. So the first thing we have to do, of course, is get the get package, put that in our pubspec.yaml, then we can import it here. Then we're going to make a class, whatever state we use, and in their examples they prefer to use the word controller, something like class controller extends GetX controller, but I don't want to use a different name for every single package, so I'm trying to make it a bit more similar across them, but there's that. And then we're going to extend GetX controller, which is slightly different than our Provider where we used with change notifier. Then aside from that, the actual content is quite similar. The main difference being, instead of using notify listeners and being able to actually check anything, we're going to specify the actual values we want to listen to, either using .obs, which means make it observable, or we use rx, for example, rx string here. And in fact, I'm going to change this really quickly, or we could use rx bool, like this, or whatever other type we're using. But of course, it's easier to just put .obs and not worry about the different types. Similarly, we can use just rx and use the different type in here as a generic. So this could be string, this could be bool, this could be int, or whatever. And then we have our functions as before. Nothing really complicated here. The only difference again between this and this is we don't need the notify listeners, and instead, whenever we want to change the value or listen to the value, we need to specify .value, because at the end of the day, this is not a string, it's an observable whose value is a string. So we need to go ahead and get that. And all of this is pretty much the same, just my function here is more correct. I made it more correct from the get-go. Then inside the widget, it's simplified a lot because we no longer need to make the change notifier Provider. We don't need the consumer. We can just simplify that and get the state by having the name of the class and then using get.put with that class name here. And then whenever we want to use it, we're gonna use the state inside an OBX widget. And there are other ways. I'm just showing you the easiest way of doing it for now. And the OBX widget takes a function which must return whatever we want to return, whatever widget we want to display on screen. And of course, we could make this really complicated. This could be the entire body of the scaffold, but our current app is quite simple. But yes, gentlemen, so that is pretty much it for GetX. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. And I'm looking forward to the next video when we're gonna, flesh out these different states a bit more, do some more bug fixes, get that pause button, reset button, all those things working correctly. So I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys are as well. But in the meantime, myself, Ovidius, I'm out.